Sarah Martinez had always been the quiet one in her family. Growing up in a small Texas town, she spent her afternoons helping her father at his gun shop, organizing ammunition boxes and cleaning rifles. Her hands were small but steady, and she had an eye for detail that impressed even the most experienced hunters who visited the store. When she turned 18, Sarah surprised everyone by enlisting in the Navy. Her parents thought she would choose a safe desk job, maybe work in communications or administration, but Sarah had different plans. She wanted to prove that she was more than just the girl who organized bullets behind the counter. Boot camp was brutal. Sarah was one of only 12 women in a group of 200 recruits. The drill instructors pushed everyone to their limits, but they seemed to push the women even harder. Sarah's bunkmates often found her doing extra push-ups late at night, determined not to be the weak link. Her shooting scores were decent, but nothing spectacular. She was accurate enough to pass, but not outstanding enough to draw attention. After basic training, Sarah was assigned to a support unit. Her job was simple: carry ammunition, maintain weapons, and support the real fighters. She told herself this was fine. She was serving her country, and that was what mattered. But deep down, she felt like she was still just organizing bullets, just like back home in her father's shop. The support unit was stationed at a forward operating base in the Middle East. Sarah's days were filled with routine tasks: checking inventory, cleaning weapons, and loading ammunition into transport vehicles. The other soldiers respected her work ethic, but nobody saw her as anything more than reliable support staff. She was the person they could count on to have their gear ready, not the person they would trust to watch their backs in a firefight. Everything changed when Sarah's unit was assigned to support a special operations team. The SEALs were different from regular soldiers. They moved with purpose and spoke in quiet, measured tones. Their equipment was more advanced, their training more intense, and their missions more dangerous. Sarah felt intimidated but also fascinated by their professionalism. The team leader, Chief Petty Officer Marcus Rodriguez, was a veteran with over 15 years of experience. He had kind eyes but a serious demeanor. During the briefing, he looked directly at Sarah and said, "Martinez, you'll be our ammunition specialist. Stay close, stay alert, and keep our weapons fed. We're counting on you." It was the first time anyone had spoken to her like she was truly part of a team. The mission was supposed to be routine reconnaissance. The SEAL team would observe enemy movements in a remote valley, gather intelligence, and return to base within 72 hours. Sarah's job was to carry extra ammunition and ensure the team's weapons remained functional. She had trained for this type of support role, but she had never been this close to real combat operations. As they prepared for departure, Sarah noticed something different about herself. Her usual nervousness was replaced by focused concentration. She checked and double-checked every piece of equipment, every round of ammunition. The other team members watched her work and nodded approvingly. For the first time since enlisting, Sarah felt like she truly belonged somewhere. The helicopter ride to the insertion point was tense. Sarah sat between two SEALs, feeling the weight of her equipment pack and the responsibility on her shoulders. She thought about her father's gun shop, about all those afternoons spent learning about different types of ammunition and their specific uses. She never imagined that knowledge would be put to such a critical test. When they landed in the desert, Sarah's real education began. The SEALs moved like shadows, communicating with hand signals and maintaining perfect formation. Sarah stayed in the middle of the group exactly as instructed, but she found herself observing everything around her. The way they scanned for threats, how they chose their positions, and most importantly, how they handled their weapons with such natural precision. Chief Rodriguez noticed her attention to detail during their first night. "You're not just carrying ammo, Martinez," he said quietly. "You're watching everything." "That's good. The best support personnel understand the whole picture, not just their piece of it." His words gave Sarah a new sense of purpose. She wasn't just a pack mule carrying supplies. She was an integral part of the team's success. The valley they were observing was more active than intelligence reports had suggested. Enemy patrols moved through the area regularly, and their equipment was more sophisticated than expected. The SEAL team's mission became more complex and dangerous with each passing hour. Sarah found herself not just carrying ammunition, but also serving as an extra set of eyes and ears for the team. On their second night in position, Sarah spotted movement that the others had missed. A small group of enemy fighters was approaching their hidden observation post from an unexpected direction. Her quiet alert to Chief Rodriguez potentially saved the entire team from walking into an ambush. "Good catch, Martinez," he whispered. "You might have just saved all our lives." For the first time since joining the military, Sarah felt like she was truly making a difference. She was no longer just the girl from the gun shop or the quiet support soldier. She was becoming something she had never imagined possible, a warrior in her own right. But the real test was still to come, and nothing could have prepared her for what would happen next. The third day began like any other. Sarah woke before dawn, checked her equipment, and prepared for another day of observation. The SEAL team had gathered valuable intelligence about enemy movements, and their mission was almost complete. Chief Rodriguez seemed satisfied with their progress and mentioned that they would likely return to base within 24 hours. Sarah felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. She was eager to return to safety, but she had also discovered something about herself during these 3 days. Being part of this elite team, even in a support role, had awakened a confidence she never knew existed. She found herself hoping for more opportunities like this one. The morning observation session revealed increased enemy activity. Large convoys were moving through the valley, suggesting that something important was happening. Chief Rodriguez made the decision to extend their mission by 1 day to gather more intelligence. Sarah nodded when he looked at her for confirmation. She was ready to stay as long as needed. Around midday, everything went wrong in a matter of seconds. The team was repositioning to get a better view of a large enemy encampment when they were spotted by a patrol. The first gunshots echoed through the valley like thunder, and Sarah's training kicked in immediately. She dropped to the ground and crawled toward the nearest cover, her ammunition pack bouncing against her back. The firefight was unlike anything Sarah had experienced in training. Real bullets whistled overhead, striking rocks and sending fragments flying in every direction. The sound was deafening and the smell of gunpowder filled the air. Sarah's job was to stay low and keep the team supplied with ammunition, but she found herself studying the battle unfolding around her. Chief Rodriguez was directing the team's defensive actions while returning precise fire at the enemy positions. His movements were calculated and efficient, each shot carefully aimed. Sarah watched him work and realized that this was what true marksmanship looked like. It wasn't just about hitting targets at a shooting range. It was about making every bullet count when lives were on the line. The enemy forces were larger than expected and well-equipped. They had the SEAL team pinned down behind rocky cover with limited options for escape. Sarah crawled from position to position, delivering ammunition to each team member and helping to redistribute supplies as needed. The weight of her pack, which had seemed manageable during training, now felt enormous as she moved under fire. During a brief lull in the shooting, Chief Rodriguez called for air support and medical evacuation. But the response was not what they hoped to hear. Bad weather was moving into the area, making helicopter operations impossible for at least 6 hours. The team would have to hold their position and defend themselves until conditions improved. Sarah felt her heart pounding as she processed this information. 6 hours might as well have been 6 days under these circumstances. The enemy had them outnumbered and surrounded, with more fighters arriving every hour. She looked around at the SEAL team members and saw the same realization in their faces. This was going to be a long, dangerous day. The enemy began a coordinated assault on their position around 3 in the afternoon. Sarah had never seen anything like it. Dozens of fighters advanced from multiple directions, while others provided covering fire from elevated positions. The sound of automatic weapons was constant, and Sarah could feel the heat from tracer rounds passing close to her head. Chief Rodriguez was everywhere at once, coordinating the team's defense and taking careful shots at enemy leaders. Sarah watched in amazement as he would identify a target, line up his shot, and eliminate the threat with surgical precision. His rifle seemed like an extension of his body, and every movement was purposeful and effective. But even the most skilled marksman has limitations. Chief Rodriguez was covering the team's left flank when an enemy sniper found his position. The bullet struck him in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his rifle flying several feet away. Sarah saw him fall and immediately began crawling toward his position, ignoring the bullets striking the ground around her. When she reached Chief Rodriguez, he was conscious but bleeding heavily. His shooting arm was useless, and he was struggling to maintain his grip on his sidearm. "Martinez," he said through gritted teeth, "I need you to take my position. You know how to shoot, right?" Sarah nodded, but her throat was too dry to speak. She had trained with rifles, but this was completely different. Chief Rodriguez's rifle was a highly modified weapon with advanced optics and custom components. Sarah had cleaned similar weapons but had never fired anything this sophisticated. She picked it up carefully, feeling the weight and balance of the precision instrument. "The scope is zeroed for 200 yards, Chief Rodriguez explained quickly. "Use the wind meter on your watch and remember everything you learned in your father's shop." Sarah was surprised that he knew about her background, but there was no time to ask questions. She could see enemy fighters moving closer to their position, and the rest of the team was depending on her to cover the left flank. She settled into the shooting position that Chief Rodriguez had vacated, trying to remember everything she had ever learned about marksmanship. Through the rifle's scope, Sarah could see individual enemy fighters clearly for the first time. They were real people, not paper targets, and they were trying to kill her teammates. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders like a heavy blanket. She thought about Chief Rodriguez bleeding behind her, about the other SEAL team members counting on her to do her job. Sarah's first shot missed completely. The rifle's recoil was stronger than she expected, and she hadn't properly adjusted for the wind conditions. She could hear Chief Rodriguez coaching her quietly. "Breathe slowly, squeeze gently, follow through." She chambered another round and tried again, this time taking more time to line up the shot properly. Her second shot found its target. An enemy fighter who had been advancing on their position suddenly stopped and fell backward. Sarah felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and horror at what she had just accomplished. But there was no time to process these emotions. More targets were appearing, and her teammates needed her to keep shooting. As the afternoon wore on, Sarah found herself settling into a rhythm. Each shot became more natural, more precise. She began to understand the rifle's characteristics and how to compensate for environmental factors. Chief Rodriguez continued to provide guidance when he could, but Sarah was beginning to trust her own instincts and training. The enemy forces seemed surprised by the accuracy of fire coming from the SEAL team's position. Several of their advances were stopped by Sarah's precise shooting, and their commanders appeared to be reconsidering their assault strategy. For the first time since the battle began, Sarah felt like they might actually survive this ordeal. But the biggest challenges were still ahead, and Sarah was about to face a test that would define the rest of her military career. As the sun began to set, the enemy forces changed their tactics. Instead of direct assaults, they began using snipers to pin down the SEAL team while other fighters tried to flank their position. Sarah found herself in a deadly game of cat and mouse with enemy marksmen who were trying to eliminate her and Chief Rodriguez. The first enemy sniper revealed his position when his muzzle flash reflected off a piece of metal in the distance. Sarah had been scanning the horizon through her scope when she caught the brief glint of light. Her father had taught her to watch for such details when hunting, explaining that even the smallest reflection could reveal a hidden target. Sarah took her time lining up the shot. The distance was at least 400 yards, much farther than anything she had attempted earlier in the day. She had to account for wind, the downward angle of her shot, and the fact that her target might move at any moment. Chief Rodriguez watched her through pain-filled eyes and whispered, "You've got this, Martinez. Trust your training." The shot was perfect. Sarah watched through her scope as the enemy sniper's rifle fell silent. She had eliminated a threat that could have killed any member of her team. The other SEAL team members, who had been pinned down by sniper fire, were able to resume their defensive positions. For the first time since the battle began, Sarah felt like she was truly contributing to their survival. But the enemy had more snipers, and they had learned to be more careful about revealing their positions. Sarah found herself engaged in a patient hunting game, searching for any sign of enemy marksmen while maintaining her defense of the team's left flank. Every shadow could conceal a threat. Every reflection might be a rifle scope aimed at her teammates. Chief Rodriguez's condition was getting worse. Despite Sarah's efforts to treat his wound with the team's medical supplies, he was losing blood and struggling to stay conscious. The other team members were running low on ammunition, and Sarah was having to make difficult decisions about which targets posed the greatest immediate threats. During a brief quiet period, Sarah took inventory of their situation. They had been fighting for over 6 hours, and rescue was still at least 2 hours away. Their ammunition supplies were running dangerously low, and Chief Rodriguez needed immediate medical attention. The enemy forces had suffered significant casualties, but still outnumbered the SEAL team by at least 3 to 1. Sarah realized that she was no longer just the ammunition carrier or the backup shooter. Chief Rodriguez was barely conscious, and the other team members were looking to her for guidance on defensive positioning and target priority. Somehow, without anyone officially announcing it, she had become the team's primary marksman and tactical coordinator. The responsibility was overwhelming, but Sarah found strength in the trust her teammates were placing in her. These were elite soldiers with years of combat experience, and they were counting on her judgment to keep them alive. She thought about her father's words from years ago. Marksmanship isn't just about shooting straight. It's about making good decisions under pressure. As darkness fell, Sarah's advantages as a sniper actually improved. The advanced night vision scope on Chief Rodriguez's rifle allowed her to see enemy movements that were invisible to the naked eye. She could watch fighters positioning themselves for attacks and eliminate key targets before they could threaten her team. Sarah's shooting had evolved throughout the day from desperate survival to calculated precision. She was no longer just reacting to immediate threats. She was anticipating enemy movements and disrupting their tactical plans. Her shots were becoming more selective and more effective, and she was learning to use ammunition conservation as a tactical advantage. The enemy commanders seemed to recognize that something had changed in the SEAL team's defensive capabilities. Their attacks became more cautious and less coordinated as Sarah eliminated their key personnel. Squad leaders who tried to organize assaults found themselves targeted by incredibly accurate fire from an unexpected source. Around 10 o'clock at night, Sarah faced her most difficult challenge yet. A large group of enemy fighters had positioned themselves in a complex of buildings about 600 yards away, preparing for a coordinated night assault. Sarah could see them through her night vision scope, but the shots required would be at the absolute limit of her capabilities. Chief Rodriguez had briefly regained consciousness and was watching Sarah work. "Those are leadership targets," he whispered. "Take out their commanders and the assault will fall apart." Sarah nodded, understanding that the success of this mission now depended on her ability to make several extremely difficult shots under combat conditions. The first shot took down what appeared to be the overall commander of the enemy forces. Sarah watched as the other fighters gathered around their fallen leader, creating confusion and disrupting their attack preparations. She chambered another round and searched for the next priority target through her scope. Her second shot eliminated a fighter who was carrying what looked like a radio, cutting off the enemy's communications with other units in the area. The third shot targeted someone who appeared to be organizing the assault teams, further disrupting their coordination. With each successful shot, Sarah could see the enemy's confidence crumbling, but the most important shot was still to come. Through her scope, Sarah spotted an enemy sniper who had positioned himself to target the SEAL team's right flank. He was well concealed and nearly 700 yards away, at the very edge of her rifle's effective range. Missing this shot could result in casualties among her teammates. Sarah took several minutes to prepare for this shot. She studied the wind conditions, checked her scope adjustments, and controlled her breathing exactly as her father had taught her years ago. Chief Rodriguez watched silently, knowing that his protege was about to attempt something that would challenge even experienced military snipers. The shot was perfect. Sarah watched the enemy sniper fall backward, his rifle spinning away into the darkness. The other team members had seen the muzzle flash from the enemy position and realized what Sarah had just accomplished. "Incredible shot, Martinez," one of them whispered over the radio. "That guy had us dead to rights." As the night wore on, Sarah continued to dominate the battlefield with precision fire. The enemy forces had gone from confident attackers to cautious survivors, afraid to expose themselves to her deadly accurate shooting. The planned night assault never materialized, and by midnight, the enemy had begun withdrawing from the area entirely. Sarah had transformed from an ammunition carrier into the most effective fighting member of an elite SEAL team. But the greatest test of her newfound skills was still ahead, and it would require everything she had learned about courage, precision, and leadership under fire. Just before dawn, when Sarah thought the worst was over, a new threat emerged. Intelligence reports crackled over the radio indicating that a large enemy reinforcement convoy was approaching their position. This wasn't just another patrol or assault team. This was a full company of well-equipped fighters with armored vehicles and heavy weapons. Sarah felt her stomach drop as she processed this information. The SEAL team had barely survived 12 hours against a smaller enemy force. Chief Rodriguez was unconscious again. They were almost out of ammunition, and rescue helicopters were still grounded due to weather conditions. Now they faced an enemy force that was probably 10 times larger than what they had been fighting. The other team members gathered around Sarah for a tactical discussion. It was surreal to her that these experienced soldiers were looking to her for leadership. But Chief Rodriguez was in no condition to command, and she had proven herself throughout the night as their most effective fighter. "What do you think, Martinez?" asked Petty Officer Jackson. "Do we try to break contact and evade?" Sarah studied their tactical situation through her rifle scope. The approaching convoy was moving along the main valley road, which would bring them directly past the SEAL team's position. There was no way to move Chief Rodriguez safely in his condition, and attempting to evade with wounded personnel would likely result in the team being caught in the open by superior forces. "We stay and fight," Sarah decided, surprising herself with the confidence in her voice. "Chief Rodriguez can't be moved, and they'll catch us if we try to run. Our best chance is to use this defensive position and make them pay for every yard they advance." The other team members nodded agreement, trusting her judgment despite her relative inexperience. Sarah began positioning the team for what she knew would be their final battle. She assigned specific sectors of fire to each team member and made sure everyone understood the priority targets. Most importantly, she took responsibility for engaging the enemy's heavy weapons and armored vehicles, knowing that her precision shooting would be their only chance against superior firepower. The convoy appeared on the horizon just as the sun was rising. Sarah counted at least 8 vehicles, including several armored personnel carriers and what looked like a light tank. Through her scope, she could see dozens of enemy fighters preparing for what they obviously expected to be an easy victory against a small, trapped force. Sarah's first priority was intelligence gathering. She studied the enemy formation through her scope, identifying key vehicles and personnel. The convoy commander appeared to be riding in the second vehicle, and there was definitely a heavy machine gun mounted on the lead armored carrier. Taking out these priority targets would be essential to disrupting their attack. As the convoy approached within effective range, Sarah made a decision that shocked even herself. Instead of waiting for the enemy to attack, she would initiate contact by taking out their leadership and heavy weapons before they could deploy effectively. This was an incredibly aggressive tactic for a defensive position, but Sarah had learned to trust her instincts. Her first shot targeted the gunner on the lead vehicle's heavy machine gun. At 800 yards, it was an extremely difficult shot, but Sarah had learned to compensate for all the variables that affected long-range accuracy. The gunner fell backward, and the heavy weapon swung uselessly as the vehicle continued forward. Sarah's second shot was aimed at the convoy commander in the second vehicle. She could see him standing up in his seat, probably trying to understand what had happened to his lead gunner. The shot was perfect, eliminating the enemy's battlefield commander before he could organize an effective response to the SEAL team's defensive fire. The convoy immediately stopped and began deploying into defensive positions, but their coordination was already compromised by Sarah's precision shooting. Without their commander and key weapons, the enemy fighters were reacting rather than executing a coordinated battle plan. Sarah had bought her team precious time and tactical advantage, but the enemy still had overwhelming numerical superiority and heavier weapons than the SEAL team could handle. Sarah watched through her scope as they began setting up mortars and preparing for a systematic attack on the SEAL team's position. She realized that precision shooting alone wouldn't be enough to win this battle. "Jackson," she called to the team's explosives expert, "can you take out that mortar position with what we have left?" Petty Officer Jackson studied the enemy position through his binoculars and shook his head. "Too far and too much cover. I'd need to get within 100 yards, and there's no way to approach without being seen." Sarah studied the tactical situation and came up with a desperate plan. If she could eliminate the sentries and spotters around the mortar position, Jackson might be able to approach under cover of her precision fire. It would require perfect shooting under combat conditions, but it was their only chance to neutralize the enemy's heavy weapons. "Give me 5 minutes to clear a path," Sarah told Jackson. "When I signal, move fast and stay low. I'll cover your approach with precision fire, but you'll only have one chance to take out those mortars." Jackson nodded grimly, knowing that the success of this plan depended entirely on Sarah's shooting skills. Sarah began the most challenging sequence of shots in her life. She had to eliminate multiple targets in rapid succession, while maintaining perfect accuracy over distances of 600 to 800 yards. The first sentry fell silently, never knowing what hit him. The second target was more alert, but Sarah's shot found him before he could raise an alarm. The third and fourth targets were positioned to watch each other's backs, making them much more difficult to eliminate without being detected. Sarah had to wait for the perfect moment when both targets were looking away from each other, then make two perfect shots within seconds. Her timing was flawless, and both enemy fighters fell simultaneously. Jackson began his approach to the mortar position, while Sarah continued to eliminate any threats that might detect him. She felt like she was playing a deadly video game, but the consequences of missing were all too real. Every shot had to be perfect, every target had to fall silently, or her teammate would be walking into a trap. The mortar position was eliminated in a spectacular explosion that scattered enemy equipment across the battlefield. Jackson had successfully destroyed their heavy weapons, but the explosion also revealed his position to the remaining enemy forces. Sarah immediately began laying down covering fire to help him return to their defensive position. What happened next would test every skill Sarah had developed as a marksman and as a leader. The enemy forces, enraged by the destruction of their heavy weapons, launched an all-out assault on the SEAL team's position. Sarah found herself facing dozens of targets simultaneously, while trying to coordinate her team's defensive efforts and keep Chief Rodriguez alive. For 20 minutes, Sarah's rifle never stopped firing. She was shooting so rapidly that the barrel became too hot to touch, but her accuracy never wavered. Every shot eliminated a threat. Every bullet served a tactical purpose. She had transcended mere marksmanship and achieved something approaching artistry with her weapon. When the assault finally ended, the battlefield was silent except for the sound of Sarah's heavy breathing. The enemy forces had been completely defeated, but Sarah barely had the strength to keep her rifle steady. She had fired nearly 200 rounds of precision ammunition, and her shooting hand was cramped from maintaining perfect trigger control for so long. Chief Rodriguez had regained consciousness and was staring at Sarah with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. "Martinez," he said weakly, "I've never seen shooting like that in 15 years of combat. You just took apart an entire company by yourself." Sarah was too exhausted to respond, but she felt a deep sense of satisfaction at his words. The rescue helicopters finally arrived just after noon, their crews amazed to find the SEAL team not only alive, but victorious against overwhelming odds. As Sarah helped load Chief Rodriguez onto a stretcher, he grabbed her arm and looked directly into her eyes. "You're not the ammunition carrier anymore, Martinez. You're a warrior, and don't let anyone ever tell you different." The helicopter ride back to base was unlike anything Sarah had experienced before. The other passengers, including medical personnel and crew members, kept staring at her with expressions of awe and respect. Word of what had happened in the valley was already spreading through the military communications network, and Sarah was becoming a legend before she even landed. Chief Rodriguez was stable but required immediate surgery for his shoulder wound. As the medical team wheeled him toward the operating room, he managed to catch Sarah's attention one more time. "Tell them what really happened out there," he said with urgency in his voice. "Don't let them minimize what you accomplished." Sarah nodded, not fully understanding why this was so important to him. Sarah's first stop was a debriefing session with intelligence officers who wanted to understand exactly what had happened during the mission. She sat in a small room with 3 senior officers, feeling intimidated by their rank and experience. They asked detailed questions about enemy positions, weapons, and tactics, but Sarah could tell they were most interested in her transformation from support personnel to sniper. "According to the other team members," said Colonel Patterson, "you eliminated over 60 enemy combatants with precision rifle fire. That's an extraordinary claim for someone with your background and training level." Sarah sensed skepticism in his voice and realized that some people might not believe what had actually happened in the valley. Sarah provided a detailed account of each engagement, explaining her tactical decisions and describing the specific challenges she had faced. She was careful to give credit to Chief Rodriguez for his guidance and to the other team members for their support. But the officers seemed most interested in understanding how an ammunition specialist had become such an effective sniper so quickly. "My father owned a gun shop," Sarah explained. I grew up around firearms and learned marksmanship principles from childhood. Chief Rodriguez's rifle was exceptional equipment, and the combat situation forced me to apply everything I had ever learned about shooting. The officers took extensive notes but remained somewhat skeptical about the scope of her accomplishments. After the debriefing, Sarah was sent to the medical facility for evaluation. She had been in combat for over 18 hours and had fired hundreds of rounds of ammunition under extreme stress. The medical team was concerned about the physical and psychological effects of such intense combat experience on someone with limited previous exposure to battlefield conditions. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a combat psychologist, spent over an hour talking with Sarah about her experiences. It's unusual for someone to adapt so quickly to high-stress combat situations, she explained. Most soldiers require extensive experience before they can function effectively under the kind of pressure you faced. I'm interested in understanding how you processed these challenges mentally. Sarah found it difficult to explain what had happened to her during the battle. She remembered feeling afraid at first, but then settling into a focused state where everything seemed to slow down and become crystal clear. It was like all the noise and chaos faded away, and I could see exactly what needed to be done, she told Dr. Walsh. Each shot felt natural and inevitable. The psychological evaluation concluded that Sarah had demonstrated remarkable resilience and adaptability under combat stress. Dr. Walsh's report noted that Sarah showed no signs of combat trauma and had actually seemed to thrive in the high-pressure environment. This was highly unusual for someone with her limited combat experience. News of Sarah's performance spread rapidly through the military community. Within days, she was receiving requests for interviews from military journalists and being contacted by representatives from various special operations units. The story of the ammunition carrier who had become a sniper overnight was capturing imaginations throughout the armed forces. Sarah's commanding officer, Major Robert Chen, called her into his office for a private conversation. Martinez, he said, you've created quite a stir with your performance out there. I've got 3 different special operations units asking if they can recruit you, and the media wants to make you the poster child for women in combat. How do you feel about all this attention? Sarah was honest about her mixed feelings regarding the sudden fame. She was proud of what she had accomplished, but concerned about being treated as a curiosity rather than a serious soldier. I just want to serve effectively, sir, she said. If that means continuing in special operations, I'm interested. But I don't want to be anyone's token female sniper. Major Chen smiled at her directness. That's exactly the attitude that makes you valuable, Martinez. I'm going to recommend you for sniper school and advanced marksmanship training. But first, there's something else we need to discuss. The brass wants to put you in for some serious commendations based on your performance in the Valley. The awards process was more complicated than Sarah had expected. Military decorations require extensive documentation and witness statements, and some senior officers were still skeptical about the reports of her marksmanship performance. Sarah had to provide detailed testimony about each engagement and submit to additional questioning about her training background and combat experience. Chief Rodriguez, now recovering from surgery, became Sarah's strongest advocate during the awards process. Despite his own pain medication and recovery schedule, he spent hours providing detailed statements about Sarah's performance and tactical decision-making during the battle. She saved all our lives multiple times, he told the awards committee. I've worked with military snipers for over a decade, and I've never seen shooting like hers. The other SEAL team members also provided strong supporting testimony for Sarah's commendations. Petty Officer Jackson described her covering fire during his approach to the mortar position as the most precise and effective marksmanship I've ever witnessed in combat. Their unanimous support helped convince skeptical senior officers that the reports of Sarah's performance were accurate. 3 weeks after the mission, Sarah was awarded the Silver Star for gallantry in action against an enemy force. She was also recommended for immediate acceptance into the military's most advanced sniper training program, despite not meeting the usual prerequisites for such specialized instruction. The ceremony was small and private, but the significance was enormous for Sarah's military career. Following the award ceremony, Sarah received a visit from Command Master Chief Patricia Williams, one of the highest-ranking women in the Navy's Special Operations community. Martinez, she said, you've accomplished something remarkable. But now you face a different kind of challenge. Everyone will be watching to see if your performance in the valley was a fluke or the beginning of something bigger. Sarah understood that her real test was just beginning. Combat had revealed capabilities she never knew she possessed, but now she had to prove that she could develop those capabilities through formal training and consistent performance. The pressure of expectations was different from the pressure of combat, but it was just as intense and potentially more dangerous to her career. As Sarah prepared for advanced sniper training, she reflected on how much her life had changed in just a few weeks. She had gone from carrying ammunition to earning recognition as one of the military's most promising marksmen. But she also knew that this was just the beginning of a much longer journey toward becoming the soldier she was capable of being. The girl from the Texas gun shop had discovered the warrior within herself, but now she had to prove that this warrior could be trained, developed, and relied upon for future missions. The real test of Sarah Martinez was just beginning, and the entire special operations community was watching to see what she would accomplish next. 6 months later, Sarah stood at the graduation ceremony of the military's most elite sniper training program, wearing the distinctive insignia that marked her as a qualified military sniper. She had not only completed the grueling course, but had set several new records for marksmanship accuracy and tactical innovation. The instructors, initially skeptical of the ammunition carrier turned sniper, were now citing her performance as an example for future students. The training had been the most challenging experience of Sarah's life. Every day brought new tests of her physical endurance, mental toughness, and shooting skills. She had learned advanced ballistics, wind reading, camouflage techniques, and fieldcraft that went far beyond anything she had imagined possible. But more importantly, she had learned to trust the instincts that had emerged during that desperate battle in the valley. Master Gunnery Sergeant Thompson, the chief instructor, had been particularly tough on Sarah throughout the program. He had seen too many soldiers fail under the pressure of advanced training, and he was determined not to let Sarah's initial success create unrealistic expectations. "Martinez," he said during their final evaluation, "you came here with raw talent and combat experience. You're leaving as a professional. That's the difference between surviving one battle and building a career." The training had taught Sarah that her performance in the valley, while impressive, was just the beginning of her education as a sniper. She had learned about advanced optics, different types of ammunition for various situations, and shooting techniques that could be effective at ranges she had never imagined. But most importantly, she had learned to think like a sniper, not just shoot like one. Sarah's new assignment was with an elite reconnaissance unit that specialized in deep insertion missions behind enemy lines. Her role would be to provide precision fire support and eliminate high-value targets while small teams gathered intelligence or conducted sabotage operations. It was exactly the kind of challenging work she had discovered she was capable of during that first mission. Chief Rodriguez, now fully recovered from his shoulder wound, had requested transfer to the same unit so he could work with Sarah again. "I want to see what you can accomplish when you're properly trained and equipped," he told her with a smile. "That mission in the valley was just your audition. Now let's see what you can do as a professional." Sarah's reputation had spread throughout the special operations community, but she was careful not to let the attention go to her head. She had seen other soldiers destroyed by early success and unrealistic expectations. Her goal was to prove that her performance in the valley was not a fluke but the beginning of a distinguished career in military service. The first mission with her new unit came 3 weeks after graduation from sniper school. Intelligence had identified a terrorist training camp in a remote mountain region where enemy forces were planning attacks against civilian targets. Sarah's team was tasked with conducting surveillance and eliminating key leadership targets if the opportunity presented itself. Sarah felt completely different preparing for this mission compared to her first experience as an ammunition carrier. She now had her own custom rifle, advanced equipment, and most importantly, the confidence that came from professional training and proven combat experience. She was no longer the support person hoping to prove herself. She was the specialist that others were counting on to accomplish the mission. The mission went flawlessly. Sarah's precision shooting eliminated 3 high-value targets from distances exceeding 1,000 yards, disrupting the enemy's operational planning and saving countless civilian lives. Her teammates watched her work with professional appreciation, recognizing that they were witnessing exceptional marksmanship. combined with sound tactical judgment. Following the successful mission, Sarah received a visit from Admiral Rebecca Foster, the commanding officer of all Navy Special Operations Forces. "Martinez," the Admiral said, "I've been following your career development with great interest. Your transformation from support personnel to elite sniper is remarkable. But what impresses me most is your professionalism and dedication to continuous improvement." Admiral Foster had an unusual proposal for Sarah. The Navy was developing a new training program for precision marksmen, and they wanted Sarah to help design the curriculum based on her unique experiences and rapid skill development. "You understand both the technical aspects of marksmanship and the psychological challenges of combat shooting," she explained. "That combination of knowledge could be invaluable for training the next generation of military snipers." Sarah was honored by the opportunity, but also concerned about leaving active combat operations. "Ma'am, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not sure I'm ready to move into a training role. I feel like I'm just getting started as an operational sniper." Admiral Foster smiled at Sarah's dedication to field work but encouraged her to consider the broader impact she could have on the military. "Martinez, you've proven yourself in combat and completed advanced training with distinction, but the greatest contribution you could make might be sharing your knowledge with others. Think about how many soldiers could benefit from understanding your approach to developing marksmanship. Skills under pressure." The Admiral gave Sarah 2 weeks to consider the assignment. During those 2 weeks, Sarah had long conversations with Chief Rodriguez about her career direction. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "when I first met you, I saw potential that you didn't even recognize in yourself. Now you have the opportunity to help other soldiers discover their own potential. That might be more important than any individual mission you could complete." Sarah also spoke with her father during a brief leave period. He was incredibly proud of her accomplishments, but offered a perspective she hadn't considered. "Sweetheart, you've proven that you can be an exceptional soldier. But maybe your real gift is helping others become exceptional too. Think about all those afternoons you spent in the gun shop, learning not just how to shoot but how to teach others to shoot safely and accurately." After careful consideration, Sarah decided to accept the training assignment. She would spend the next 2 years developing and implementing advanced marksmanship training programs while continuing to participate in selected operational missions. It was a compromise that would allow her to contribute to both immediate military operations and long-term force development. Sarah's training programs revolutionized how the military approached sniper development. She incorporated psychological preparation techniques, adaptive learning methods, and realistic stress training that helped students develop combat-effective skills more rapidly than traditional programs. Her approach was based on the understanding that marksmanship under pressure requires different skills than range shooting. 3 years after that first mission as an ammunition carrier, Sarah was promoted to staff sergeant and recognized as one of the military's leading experts on combat marksmanship training. She had trained over 200 snipers, many of whom went on to distinguished careers in special operations. But she never forgot the lesson from that desperate battle in the valley. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is step up when someone else goes down. Chief Rodriguez, now serving as Sarah's second-in-command at the training facility, often told new students about that first mission. Staff Sergeant Martinez didn't become a great sniper because she was naturally gifted, he would explain. She became great because when her team needed her most, she was willing to pick up a rifle and do whatever was necessary to keep everyone alive. That's the attitude that makes a real warrior. Sarah's story became legendary throughout the military, but she remained focused on the practical work of training soldiers and preparing for missions. She had learned that true success wasn't about individual recognition, but about contributing to something larger than herself. The girl who had once just organized ammunition had become a leader who helped others discover their own potential for greatness. When new students asked Sarah about her transformation from ammunition carrier to elite sniper, she would always give them the same answer. "I didn't change who I was. I just discovered who I had always been capable of becoming. The only difference was that when the moment came, I was willing to try." It was a lesson that would inspire military personnel for generations to come.